Massachusetts. Les vamos a contar la historia.
Lo que habló el alcalde de Boston, Mary Walsh, hace unos momentos sobre las actualizaciones.
Por primera vez, un análisis del debate que se acaba de realizar.
Esa política monetaria que sí es como un chorro que abre.
Con el mejor seguro médico que a lo mejor estás buscando.
All right. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everybody. 2:29 on a Friday afternoon aquí en el Mundo, Boston. The following half hour is going to be mostly in English, en inglés. I have already explained to our audience previously during the news that this was going to be in English because this is one of those shows that's going to be shared to many non-Latinos, maybe many non-Spanish speaking. So obviously, El Mundo Boston has been doing a lot on this story. It's going to be in the paper. We'll do a kind of a summary after in Spanish. Maybe we could even have discussions further on what we hear today. But I'm just letting know, le estoy dejando saber a nuestra audiencia, el siguiente programa va a ser en inglés para que nuestras autoridades y personas que no hablen español entiendan bien lo que está pasando en Chelsea y puedan compartirlo con sus senadores, representantes, gobernadores, alcaldes, etcétera. Porque lo que le vamos a dar es una plataforma sin filtros a algunos líderes de Chelsea para que le expresen y en realidad le expliquen a nuestra audiencia que no habla español lo que está pasando. So basically, this is a non-filtered platform for several of our leaders to kind of give an overview of the way our folks in Chelsea feel. Number two, the situation in Chelsea. And third, what's been in the news or not, and I would say not as much news as it should, is what is going on with the COVID-19 distribution plan and why folks in Chelsea are outraged and frustrated. First of all, I want to say good afternoon to our great friends from La Colaborativa, Gladys Vega, Executive Director. Gladys, the young woman to your right, what is her name? I'm sorry, I don't have it here. I know her very well. I'm just horrible with names. I think she moved the camera.
Okay.
Good. Now you got to put the camera up. There you go. And put the camera. In the meantime, we also have State Senator. Let me see if she's got it. Got it? There we go.
Hi, everyone. Noria Elisa Jesus, Director of Policy and Advocacy here at La Colaborativa.
There you go. And to the bottom there is also a good friend to the community, State Senator Sal Domenico. Sal, thank you for joining us. I think you also turn off the camera. There you go. Nobody touched anything.
No, I am here. Thank you all for having me, Alberto. This is really an important issue that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah,
the impact that it has on Chelsea, very, very, very important.
Yeah, and just for those just reference points, Sal, what is the district that you represent?
So I have, it's a big district. I have all of Chelsea, all of Everett, all of Charlestown. I have half of the city of Cambridge, part of Alston, part of Brighton, and the west end of Boston.
Okay, good. Hey, Gladys, because it's a little noisy on your end, when you guys are not talking, I'm going to ask you to mute it because I can hear all the background itself, but that's okay. We'll get through this. Okay, let me just kind of give an overview for those who might have missed it, okay? If you've missed it, there is outrage and frustration in this brewing in the city of Chelsea. Chelsea leaders and residents are upset after a report came out that Chelsea is receiving significantly less federal funds from the COVID-19 federal fund than wealthier and less affected cities such as, just to name a few, I don't want to pick on these cities, but Newton, Cambridge, Brookline, to name just a few. Now, demonstrators, including Gladys Vega, who I believe coordinated the demonstration in La Colaborativa, actually it's La Colaborativa, it's not just Gladys, were there to protest the amount of federal aid earmarked for Chelsea, which of the $1.9 trillion federal stimulus, $11.6 million was earmarked for Chelsea. Now, while they may sound like a great deal without proper context, when you look at other cities and what they're getting, this is what got them upset. So, Michael, if you could put up on screen this. So federal COVID relief fund, right? Chelsea would get 11.6 million. Newton, 65.2 million, 5 times as more. And Cambridge, I love Cambridge. I'm from Cambridge. I'm a Cambridge boy, just like Sal, but 8 times the amount of aid that would get from the federal money than Chelsea. Now, to put in perspective, this is not about taking or taking away. It's about fairness, right? Chelsea was the epicenter of the COVID-19 situation here. Throughout for many of the times, Chelsea was battling in terms of one of the worst cities in the country, hardest hit. So when you look at those numbers and you see, and I'm from Cambridge and I have friends that live in Newton, they're significantly wealthier communities as well. And to top it all off, nowhere near the infection rate that Chelsea had during the whole entire time. I remember at the height of it, Gladys and I on the streets of Chelsea reporting the incredible infection rate, how it hit our community, and it had not just implications on health-wise, but housing situation, food shortage. And I remember Gladys telling me, the first time she admitted her age, she said that at 52 years old, she lost her life because of COVID. She had to do it because she was out on the streets. Sal, I know you were a big proponent of helping Chelsea. It's your backyard. It's your area. But you also took this personal. So I invited you guys to kind of give us, first of all, your overall feeling, unfiltered. I'm going to let Sal go first, Gladys, because I want to save your energy. Sal, when you heard about the numbers, what was your reaction? And I'll go on after you give me your kind of overview.
Yeah. So when we first saw the numbers, I had to look at them 3 or 4 times. I actually looked at them and I couldn't believe the numbers. Obviously, we were outraged. It's appalling. It's really an injustice to Chelsea. This aid package was built as something that was going to be coming to our cities and towns to offset all of the negative impacts of COVID, and to help us recover and to help us also deal with issues that will be continuing not just now but in the future, many years in the future. And when we looked at the numbers and we saw what Chelsea was getting, we weren't happy, and looked at the cities other cities, and I represent Cambridge as well. I'm a Cambridge kid as you are, and I think even Cambridge would say that wasn't a fair, equitable plan of how to distribute the federal funds. So this has been a 2-week process. When we found out about this, we have gotten to work to try to find some solutions here. There are a $4.5 billion bucket of money as well coming down from the federal government. And now it's in the state's hands in terms of trying to find some sort of fix to fill a gap and to make this a more equitable distribution of funding for our cities. Chelsea, as you mentioned, was the epicenter. And I want to just point this out too. At one point during the pandemic, Chelsea had the highest infection rate in the country per capita, except for only 2 boroughs in New York City. And we all know what happened in New York City. So Chelsea was not just a story here in our own state. It was a national story because of the impacts and the pain, the suffering, the sorrow, the sacrifice in this community that we all saw on TV, in person, the lines, people waiting for food, the housing insecurity issues that you mentioned, all the health implications because of environmental impacts. There were so many things that exacerbated what we already knew for years, that Chelsea was getting left behind and shortchanged in many other ways. This only made it worse, this pandemic. And now, with this inequitable funding formula that we've seen, this is just the same old story, right? The same old story of an impacted community looking for help. And now, when we thought we had a solution, this federal aid we thought for sure was going to be this not solve all the problems, but help us at least alleviate some of the problems. And now it's only created more of a hole, because we're in a big spot now in terms of how do we address it. Governor Baker has been contacted. He's aware of this. I have conversations with him personally. I have talked to our federal delegation as well, our partners at the State House, and I know the governor has been very open and very he wants to help. He's willing to help. So we have put together folks with the A&F team, which is Administrative Finance at the state level, to come up with a plan and come up with a figure for the Chelsea and for Everett too, because Everett is also my neighbor in my hometown. Another impacted community that was hard hit as well. And we've kind of banded together. The Chelsea and Everett folks have banded together to try to right this wrong.
Yeah,
and
we're doing
that.
We're going to get back to how we can right this wrong, okay? Because we're going to get that in the second part of the show.
Yeah.
But the scenario you just painted, nobody knows this better than the two young women who we have here, right? The impact on a daily basis, because I think it's, and I'm not saying you, Sal, I know you live it on a daily basis because it's your area, but I don't live in Chelsea. I'm there during the day, but I go home at night. I go home for the weekends, right? These people are feeling it 24/7. And when they saw what the federal government and people who are supposed to be representing us didn't say anything, because I'm going to get into that too. How do you feel, Gladys? And I know that I'm giving you an unfiltered platform, and I don't care because you deserve it. What was your feeling initially? What are you feeling now?
So right at the beginning, it was a sense of anger, betrayal. I felt completely used. I kept feeling that the stories and the suffering of my community didn't care. They were not sad enough for our federal delegation. Our federal delegation has been very, very aware of what has happened in Chelsea. We have kept them involved. We have kept them in conversations. The fact that we only got this amount of money, for me, it was an insult. It was sort of like, it was as if they were not even in attendance when these conversations were being had. I feel that I have invested so many years of my life in Elizabeth Warren's campaign, in not only sort of like talking to her about the issues of our community, but in my personal time as a community activist, as a person that is able to mobilize votes, that I was completely used and ignored completely, and that our community was not good enough to be able to be getting those funding. That our Latinos and even immigrant community didn't meet the expectation of that delegation, because they soon forgot real quickly what we have gone through. They were recently, the three of them were recently walking the hallways of Chelsea, right?
Who are the three? Let's
So,
be, who are the?
yeah, so Senator Elizabeth Warren, Ayanna Pressley, and Ed Markey.
Yep.
Yeah, yes.
Senator Ed Markey. Okay.
Yeah, and Senator, the three of them, they, when we were at the peak of the pandemic, when we were doing 11,000 boxes of food, I remember we having meetings virtually at the food line with Ed Markey, our senator. And for me, for them to be able to sort of like be able to use Chelsea as the example, right? We were the epicenter of the pandemic. This fund was established for community just like Chelsea, en honor a Chelsea. For me, the way that I saw this fund, it was like in honor of all the suffering that a community like Chelsea went through. And the fact that they feel or think that $11 million is good enough for a community that went through so much suffering, a community that regardless of the way that they, the formula they use based on population or whatever, they know very well that those numbers are inaccurate. They know very well that Chelsea residents were not going to answer the census, especially because of the dilemmas of the census this year, right? And also because we were in the middle of a pandemic in an undocumented community, majority immigrants, and also that usually, and also the census was going back and forth in, are we going to extend it? Are people going to have more time?
Gladys,
so all these things.
We have this on screen. Michael, could you please keep that up? Because, you know, you said 11.6 million, and taken without context, sounds like a lot of money, right? So from the Federal COVID Relief Fund, when you look at these numbers, Gladys, and you see Newton, 65.
Me quiero morir.
Te quieres morir. Say that in English.
So I want to die. This is so upsetting. It's like
it is upsetting. It is upsetting, yes. and
it's no equity.
Yeah. Let me stop you right there, because I do want to give Sal an opportunity to explain why. Because there is a reason why. There's a formula they used, so they didn't just pick these numbers out of a hat. There was obviously a formula. Explain to those watching, how could this have happened? What is the justification? How did these numbers come about, Sal?
Yeah, so obviously it's a very flawed formula for what we're dealing with right now. The formula that was used was intended more for a housing formula. It's a HUD formula. It was not. It had nothing was built into this formula that had anything to do with COVID in terms of the impacts of COVID. The speed that they wanted to get this out of Congress didn't, as my understanding is that the speed took precedence over trying to fix a formula. Now, the issue that I have in terms of this formula is we were told very clearly by everybody, starting with the president down, that this was going to be the saving grace for our community.
President Biden.
President Biden, exactly. From the top down, we were told this package here is what we've been waiting for. We are going to fight for our cities and towns. We're going to get the money for our cities and towns, and that happened. But did not happen for everybody equitably. So I always say this: the American Rescue Plan did not rescue Everett and Chelsea at all. At all. It only created more of a gap, more of a discrepancy, more disparity between the have and have-nots. The larger, more affluent communities, again, made out very, very well with this formula. And the communities that were impacted the most, that were on the ground, and Gladys and her team, heroes among us. We all know the stories of what Gladys is doing, putting herself at risk, her health at risk, her family at risk, to serve her community. And all of these things that we wanted to address, and you can see them right there: housing, food, health, or Gladys. This formula did not take into account all of those things that COVID brought upon our communities. So when you use an outdated formula that is based on population, and it's based on different mitigating factors with housing, it doesn't take into effect income level, it doesn't take into effect, the food insecurity issues that you're talking about. So this formula was not the right formula to use. It was not.
So I get that, and I think Gladys gets at everything. But isn't it the job of, and I have an issue right here too, and I'm going to be very clear. I have an issue with the fact that we have supposedly progressive Democrats who are for the people and all of this stuff about equity and inclusion, and yet this was not brought up. Nobody from our delegation said, wait a minute, I know the difference between Newton and Chelsea. I just was in Chelsea. I know growing up in Boston and Cambridge, I know how much poorer Chelsea is. Why didn't this at the federal level, before it even got to this? Because the way I kind of look at it is now we've got a problem and we're asking Charlie Baker to bail us out and help us. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, Gladys. You take it from here. Am I wrong with this?
No, absolutely no. And I feel that we're giving Charlie the rescue plan. He's doing the job of rescuing, when if anything, that his funding would have enhanced whatever the federal government didn't give us, or in addition, it would have been like an added bonus. The fact that this happened from three individuals that know Chelsea so well and know the stories of our people so well and speak the language of equity, right? Speak the language of diversity. Understand that our housing conditions are a community of overcrowding condition, that our population will never be 50 because we're closer to 70 than 40 as the census said in 2010. So there's no way. And also, how didn't they see the numbers and did any comparison? You don't have to be a mathematician to figure out that Cambridge and Newton are better off than Chelsea, and why are they getting more resources? And you know what? It puts me in a horrible situation where we're choosing a city versus ours, when that should have been taken care of by our delegation, our federal delegation, if they would have been responsible enough in doing so when they had the opportunity, and they let that opportunity go. So I really feel that the betrayal that I feel for the members of our community, for me, is something that I would forever remember, as I have remembered the lives that we have lost in our community, the tears that we all have shed when they tell us that someone had died with no one next to them in their bed, that family member came to the house and got locked out because the landlord found out that they had COVID and they're not welcome back. All those families are the ones that we see here in a daily basis. And the fact that our delegation knew that, they told me, I tell your stories in the hallways of Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C., here's your story. So where are my stories and the reality of my people when it comes to funding? We worry all of you when it comes to funding. I send them text messages when I learned about it. Nobody responded, right? But when I was about to hit the streets and do a protest, oh, I had everyone after me calling me on a in a three-way phone call to explain to me that they didn't do their job. I don't need an explanation when you don't do the job. I get it real quickly. And the numbers are an incredible indication that you were not at the table when those numbers were being decided. And that for me is unacceptable. And this is not about politics. This is about a community was the epic center of our community. This is about a community that has been neglected for decades. And this is only going to put us in a worse scenario. And I'm sorry, this should have been Governor Baker's responsibility. If the delegation would have done their job, would have paid attention to the needs of our community, which they did because they were recently here. So I don't get it. But if they would have gone to that meeting and fought the numbers, we would have been better off. And once again, whatever Governor Baker gives us, it would be an additional funding for our community.
Sal, how does this happen? How does our delegation drop the ball like that? I mean, I don't want to put you, I know they're friends and we're all friends. I mean, we all know each other, right? We all know these folks and they've always in other areas been there for our community, but this seems to be too important to just let it fall through the cracks.
Yeah, no, I have been on calls with all of them and spoken to some of them personally, and their staff. We've been in communication the last couple of weeks. They've given the indication that they tried to change the formula on before it became law. So that is the formula itself is a big part of this, and they were trying to tweak that formula as it was coming through Congress. Now we know at the end of the day that now we're in a very bad spot, in terms of trying to fill that gap. And Gladys is right when she says that the rescue plan would have been fantastic if we were at equal footing. And then an additional $4.5 billion that we have coming our way, we could have been asking for more. And that could have been a supplement to what this would have been, and really show that COVID was the reason why this funding was coming our way. Now, the fear is that we have to just try to find a way to bring us to a certain level to fill the gap, to fill the hole, as opposed to getting even more than we deserve. So the whole process is disappointing because now we're in a place where we're playing catch up as opposed to trying to advocate for more for our communities because we need it.
Gladys, what I know you've been talking to the Chelsea city manager, and in fairness to Chelsea city manager Ambrosino, he did want to come on with us today. He had just come off a meeting with you, actually, Gladys, a few minutes ago. Had another meeting, but we'll get him on later. But he did call this unconscionable. He was very critical, and he also said what you said, which is this is not Charlie Baker's problem. This started before. He shouldn't be asked. Well, it's not that he shouldn't be asked, but it's a tough position. Gladys, what are the solutions? What have people been talking about since the protest in terms of quote unquote fixing this?
Do you want to go? Well, first of all, we're left as staff members here at La Colaborativa to wonder how we're going to tell the 3 families that come in today that all the funding that we were fighting for increases a few days ago is still under negotiation. If there's still no guarantee, and it possibly may not be a reality. And we have families that are coming in 3, 5, or more a day with 2 caseworkers dealing with the housing instability, the mental health issues, the crisis of not having food or basic needs for their children. Then we have a wait list of over 1,000 families, close to 4,000 families, for one of our caseworkers to do RAP applications, right? And so the opportunity or the dreams of us being able to expand or even create the necessary services in our community are gone. Meanwhile, you have communities that don't need those services or probably already have the services and are pretty strong and able to continue to provide for those cities. Yet they're receiving hundreds and thousands of dollars more to basically either, create a cushion for, or expand or polish the services they may not even need in their cities, right? We have families sleeping in 24-hour laundromats. We have families sleeping in pantries, on porches. We have a woman who just got out of the hospital today. She was evicted while she was in the hospital fighting COVID because the rest of the people who are overcrowding that unit don't want to take the risk of being infected. And now she has nowhere to live. We have all her furniture in the back of our pantry, and we have nowhere to place her. You know, she has no idea where she's going to sleep tomorrow.
Yeah. And again, I want to put up those numbers again, Michael, if we can, of the different cities. To your point, again, if you're just tuning in, I love Newton, I love Cambridge, but there's no way anybody, I mean, I don't have to be in first grade to tell you that after living this year, Chelsea was suffered so much more on so many different levels. And Newton is a great wealthy city. They have a great tax base that most of their people can work from home. I'm a Cambridge kid, so I know Cambridge like the back of my hand. And there's no way Cambridge needs 87 million when Chelsea's only getting 11 million. And again, this is not pitting cities against cities, because Gladys, you said that. This is not about, it's about being equitable, right? It's who suffered the most and who needs it the most, right? You're not going to go give medicine to someone who's not sick and taking it away from the person who's dying and needs it. So, you know, I really wanted to appeal to do the show in English so that other folks, non-Latinos, because it seems like, Gladys, you're right. When you do these protests, that's where we get the attention. And sometimes if it comes out in El Mundo on Univision, we're preaching to the choir. But, you know, this is something that Latino leaders watching this now, whether you live in Chelsea or not, it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat. Hey, if you're progressive and Democrat, you should really be upset. You should really be upset right now, because I've got friends on both sides, and you know, I'm hearing it from one side. See, they talk a great game, but they don't come up when, you know, when the moment's right, right? And then you've got other ones who say, I don't even know how to respond, or they start coming up with excuses. I've actually had some of my friends come up with excuses about why they did it, and then saying it's Charlie Baker's duty to fix it. Come on. Come on. You know who you are out there, by the way. So anyways, Gladys, where do we go from here? What's your week look like? I mean, this is something that, you know, this does not go away tomorrow.
So listen, you know, Wednesdays in the Chelsea Collaborative, a day like yesterday, it's our perfect day because not perfect, but we don't have that many cows. We don't have that many emergencies. It's a morning of probably 500 people coming and getting diapers, getting the food boxes early in the morning. We begin at 8:30. We finish around 10:30. We clean up, and then we prepare boxes for the afternoon group that probably approximately 1,000 people come, pick up their food boxes, and out they go. And hardly ever we have emergencies. Yesterday we had how many cases? Six cases. 6 families. We were moving furniture in and placing people in hotels, doing the bodega, using a little supermarket, the free supermarket that we created in the back, doing food so that when we send them to the hotel, they have some food that they can warm in the microwave, because they also don't have any cash. I mean, that is on Wednesday. It is a perfect day. It has not been perfect since the pandemic began, and it's getting much worse. And I tell you, Alberto, that I always tell my friends, it's so hard for me to have a face of hope in our community, because that's what community members expect from us, that we are that group of people that are going to say, it's going to be okay, we're going to make it, no te preocupes, mi amor, vamos a estar bien. Y no estamos bien y no vamos a estar bien porque no tomaron las decisiones verdaderas y correctas. We're not going to be good because our delegation didn't make the correction decision, or they didn't do their job in order for us to be better. And by the time, and listen, I love having a government that responds to the people, but in this particular moment, that should have been like the same as vaccination. It should have been that we get them here immediately because we were the epicenter. That's what I expected from the federal delegation, that as soon as this funding or relief act came about and the policies were put in place, Chelsea was on top of the line as we were the epicenter, and this fund was for communities like Chelsea. So if you ask me what tomorrow brings for me, it brings lots of weariness. It lasts of sleepless night. 4 hours I sleep because every night Vina and I go and Norielis or any other member of our team, and we're calling and figuring out, okay, tomorrow is the expiration day of this person. These 3 families that we have in hotels, what are we doing with them? We haven't found them a room, and the money of the people that are helping us pay for their hotels, it's already gone. How are we going to maintain them? That's our situation on a daily basis. And my hope, I really, truly hope that this money coming to the city of Chelsea would help our municipal government with many resources that are needed in our community. And I tell you, I feel that Chelsea, before the pandemic, we were not a perfect city because we've been extremely poor. But we were heading to the right direction. People were getting their ESL classes. They were doing their citizenship. After 30 years of a lot of organizing and working, we were heading through the right path. And then, of course, a global pandemic. What happens in a global pandemic in an overcrowded community? What bothers me the most is that overcrowding, right? It's an indicator of how rich the pandemic is going to be. Because if you're living in overcrowded condition, this pandemic is airborne, right? And that's why our cases were so high. So talk about population. The fact that we were the epicenter demonstrates that so many people were together in different locations that, the coronavirus spread rapidly, uncontrollable. And the fact that right now we are depending on the governor's office, who has lots of other requests in many other cities and towns with their hands out, right? Here we are competing with other cities because our federal delegation didn't do their job.
Because they went with a formula instead of going with the pictures and the stories that they were sharing up at Capitol Hill.
Well, I promised State Senator we'd finish at 3 o'clock. I know he's got to get on the road. He's got a very important 3:45 to make. And Gladys, I know that you and your team are working 24 hours. So I appreciate you guys taking this half hour to kind of update our community and update those who did not know, or maybe if you knew, you didn't know how deep this was and how big of an issue it is. This has been the issue of the week. I will tell you, it is going to be the issue of the month. This is an ongoing story that will not stop here because too many people's lives are completely dependent on this. So thank you, State Senator Sal, Gladys y nuestra amiga ahí.
Norielis.
Es que ese nombre siempre it doesn't roll off my tongue. Nickname for you, Nori. Nori La Shorty. All right. All right. Thank you so much. Gladys, and try to have a good weekend. I know that you guys will be out there today, tomorrow, and even on Sunday. And thank you, Sal, again for taking the time out. All right.
Gracias.
All right. Thank you, Mike Sotos, for being our executive producer on here and putting this, helping us put this all together from performer.com. Just want to let everybody know tomorrow, tonight, Victor Hugo Rodriguez will give it an update on all of this in Spanish later tonight, because this is a story that, like I said, this is going to be an ongoing one. And stay tuned here on Mundo Boston. Share this, especially if you have somebody who does not speak Spanish, is non-Latino, or doesn't have to be non-Latino, but really needs to know what's going on. So share this right now with someone you think could move the needle and help Chelsea. All right. Thank you, Michael. Have a great weekend, everybody. And bye-bye from El Mundo Boston.